Hello and welcome to Peter's Railway. In this film we're going to look at how we built a turning loop at the far end of the Little Farm Railway. For many years the line was a simple up and down affair, so the trains always faced in one direction and ran forwards one way and then backwards the other. Then 2 years ago we built a turning loop at the top end to double the length of the line. The run was then up the line, round the loop and back down again. This was great, except that for half the runs the train had to be driven in reverse. That's not ideal because the driver can't see the line ahead and my neck was beginning to ache from trying to look over my shoulder. So this year's project has been to build a turning loop at the bottom end of the line as well. This means we can run trains continuously, going round the loops at the ends and always travelling forwards, much less dangerous. The first problem in building the new part of the railway was that the land dropped away below the line just where we wanted to put the loop. This called for a major embankment to keep the line level. It called for a lot of soil, but luckily, as with the previous loop, Mark the farmer has all the right toys you need to build a railway. I'm not sure how many tons of soil had gone into the embankment, but it would have taken an awfully long time with a wheelbarrow and shovel. This is another of Mark's wonderful machines, the 13-ton Hitachi digger on metal tracks, driven here by Tom. It's just moving into position to carry on working. Most of the embankments are sort of built now, but he's just moving into position so he can load more soil onto the sides of the embankment. You need about 1 metre across the top, but it's no good having it too steep-sided or not wide enough. All it will do is subside and not hold the weight. So when you think that each of these bucket loads would take me about an hour or two with a shovel and a wheelbarrow. So now Tom is bashing and compacting the sides of the embankment to make it more resistant to getting wet and subsiding during the winter time. The forces are unimaginable when you look at what's going on there. And lastly, Tom's grading the side of the embankment to make it look nice. It's really enjoy watching an artist at work here. So most of the embankment's done now. There's a little bit missing where we ran out of soil, but we'll get back to that later on. So the day is done. So I thought it might be fun for the readers of my books to see how closely the railway in the story relates to the railway on the farm here. And so I've got here the forgotten engine, and if we look inside, here is Peter's sketch of the turning loop, and the line comes up, round the loop, and back through the sprung points, exactly like where I'm sitting just now. So we need quite a few bricks at the far end of the railway. I use bricks to go either side to keep the ballast in place, otherwise it just gets mucked about and falls off the edge of the embankment. And it seemed a totally appropriate thing to use a small steam engine to deliver the bricks to the far end of the line. This is the engine I made before Bongo, and it's really a contractor's locomotive, so completely the correct engine to use for pulling the bricks down the line and not using Bongo. So that's the old part of the line, and I can unload the bricks from there. Now I did need some more bricks later on, and Jinx, our dog, does like to assist in railway construction matters. I think you'll agree Jinx is the most excellent train driver, and very careful, very diligent, watching out for all those possible hazards that there might be on a railway. What a conscientious driver. Oh, I've had enough now. So this morning's work was to do about another 4 or 6 metres of the brickwork. The brickwork is going to contain the ballast to stop that spreading around and getting lost down the embankment. So the bricks are laid out and a bit of soil or chalk put behind them just to stop them spreading outwards. And the track bed here is really ready for the ballast and track to be laid on. You can see stretching off into the distance the line of bricks which shows where the track is going to go. Tom's digger work is so accurate that there's going to be almost no work to set the bricks at the right height along here. So here I am setting the bricks one by one. You have to follow the line that the railway is going to go. You also have to get the height just right. So there's a brick about every 4 metres positioned already at the correct height, and with the long spirit level and plank there, I can then get the heights correct. This is actually the most difficult bit of laying out the railway, because you've got to get the heights correct, and you've got to follow the line that the railway is going to go. So that's a few done now. The next job is to lay out the bricks on the other side, and that's much easier. You only have to get them the correct distance apart from the first line, and what I'm doing is I'm using a spirit level to get them the same height. In fact, on the curve here I'm putting the ones at the outside a little bit higher to give a little bit of super elevation or banking for high speed running. And a little bit of chalk going in just outside the bricks, just to stop them from being pushed outwards by the ballast.
So to make way for the turning loop, I've got to slew the track over a bit to make way for the turn without using too much of the farmer's field. So I'm just working away at the bank here so the track can be slewed across a bit using old-fashioned tools. A pickaxe and a shovel. Very low tech for this bit.
So I needed some more tools for the next part of the job, so I decided to make life easy and scoot down on some wagons with them, and Jinx decided to come along for the ride. It's always nice to have company when building a railway. So the point has been rebuilt with lovely new sleepers, and the track has been slewed across to start the curve for the turning loop, and I have now reballasted the point. All set nice and level. And with a bit of leaning over to one side, a little bit of super elevation or canting over, about 2 degrees to start onto the curve. I mentioned earlier that we ran out of soil to completely finish the embankment. There's a small gap here, but we're going to fill that in this afternoon. So here we are with Tom again on a slightly smaller digger this time. We're digging a bit of a cutting up towards where the point is going to bring the line back into the main line, and here I am with a little mechanical wheelbarrow taking the soil down to fill in the gap. About half the gap is full by now. We need quite a lot more soil though. So Tom's tracking his way along the top of the embankment to the area we're working in. Here he is descending into the abyss. We didn't have quite enough soil from the cutting, so he's come to get a little bit more from the ground round the gap. This digger isn't quite as heavy as the Hitachi, so it's more difficult to compact it down. But you can run backwards and forwards across it to give it a bit of a squash. One finished embankment. Well, the embankment may have been finished, but there was still quite a lot of work to do on the cutting through the trees, and here is Harry helping me to dig it out with a mattock. Who would have thought that just a few years ago this was Harry here driving the little engine on our garden railway? Time flies. Anyway, Harry, put your back into it. Come on, get a move on. We haven't got all day. That's better, thank you very much. So after all that explosive hard work from Harry, it's time for Dad to do some hard labour, loading up the soil into a barrow. Oh, I wish I could work that fast in real life.
Right.
And then running it along to add it to the sides of the embankment. It was just not quite thick enough there. One of the greatest pleasures of the railway is meeting wildlife. And we had this little robin kept us company for the entire 2 days we were working on the cutting. So the job today is to make some fencing for the embankment for the turning loop. The embankment's quite high, so it would be a shame if people fell off the edge of that. And we are going to be using some old apple stakes which came out of an orchard nearby, and you can see we're going to cut rails for the fencing and stakes from the same poles. This is what it's going to look like when it's done along the whole length. So I'm going to cut these apple stakes so that we end up with a rail for the fence and a post. High-speed fencing for a high-speed railway. Another section of rail finished. Here we have a delivery of ballast, 20 tonnes of 10mm granite chips. It's a miracle the lorry didn't get stuck on the damp grass that morning. So when Grandpa Gerald and myself built the original railway, we used wooden sleepers. They're great, very realistic and quite cheap. However, they last about 20 odd years before they start getting rotten, and it's really, really hard work replacing the sleepers. You have to rake out all the ballast stones, unscrew all the sleepers, and it's all work on your hands and knees. It's really quite hard work. To do a length of track takes several hours to do. Well, the problem is I'm 62 now, and it's quite hard work now. If I make the new turning loop with wooden sleepers, they may last 20 years, that's quite good, but I shall then be 82, and I shall really not much enjoy trying to replace sleepers when I'm 82. So I've moved over now to plastic sleepers. They're recycled bottle tops is what they're made of, and being plastic they really will last they'll certainly outlast me, and they'll probably outlast Peter and Harry. So the trick is to make a gadget to cut them to length, easily all the same length, and I've made this little gadget here. It looks a bit punk, I know, but it does work. It's set up using a tree to hold it at the right angle. The angles are actually quite critical to get right, so that the sleepers slide down for the next cut and fall away in the right direction. I could tell you I've calculated the angles by mathematics. Of course that's not true, it's entirely trial and error. So I will demonstrate how it works. You take a length of sleeper, they're 3 meters long. You take a length of sleepers, put it in the gadget, the tooling we could call it, and then with the circular saw, keeping fingers well and truly clear, fairly quick work, I think you'll agree. So now we just have to make 600 sleepers for the turning loop at the far end of the railway. Tidied up, ready for the batteries to recharge to do the next batch of sleepers. So we've now got all the sleepers here stacked up like a giant Jenga game, and today's job is to drill holes in the sleepers to take the screws which will hold the rails down to make up the track panels. So it's very simple. I've got a little tool I made up. It's a piece of angle iron with holes drilled in it, and it just locates on the sleepers, and it's just a question of doing this. One done, 500 to go, I think. That was another good day's work. So today's job is delivering ballast and sleepers to the turning loop working area, and bringing the stuff in by rail, of course.
rate the stop level, and then we go back to the start. So having laid the bricks in a nice line and got the outside on the curve about a centimetre or two higher than the inside of the curve, it's only a question of emptying the ballast onto the track bed, and it doesn't take very long to rake it level, and really it's almost ready just to lay the track straight on it, and you just struggle the track around a bit just to get it to settle in and form into a bed. So some jobs on the railway are really interesting and challenging. Today's job is very easy and rather boring. I am just removing these washers off the screws that I like to use to hold the rails down onto the sleepers, and there's nearly 2,000 to do, so I've got it sort of automated as best I can do. So that's 2 boxes done now, only another 12 boxes to go. I don't know what I'm going to do with all these washers. I can't think of another use for them, so maybe I will send them back to Timco and they can use them on another production batch of screws. Meanwhile, time for a cup of proper engine driver's tea. So here's William delivering rails to the work site. They keep falling off. As Peter would have said when he was very small, oh dear. Some of the rails have made it to this end of the line. So now we've got the track bed is completely prepared, we've got the bricks, we've got the ballast which William and I put on yesterday and this morning, so now we have actually got to start making the track and laying it down on the track bed. What I'm doing this time is that the rail needs curving. You can't just spring it to the shape because it's too rigid. You'd end up with a sort of like a 50p piece bends every time you get to a joint. It would try and spring straight in. So we've got to roll the rails. We've got a little machine for doing that. It's quite hard work. But so what I'm doing this time is we're just laying a string of rails just resting on a few sleepers. We'll do that all the way around the loop before we actually make up the sleepers with the track panels, because if we make up the track panels complete with rails and sleepers all nicely screwed together, when we find that the curve is not exactly as we want it, you've got to take the whole thing to bits again in order to run the rail through the rail roller. So we're trying to roll the rails to pretty much the correct radius, then we're just putting it down to a string of rails like this, just temporarily joining them together, and then at the end we'll put the sleepers on and finish the job properly that way. So the job just now is to drill the little holes in the ends of the rails for the fish plates to bolt them together. I've made a little jig. It's a piece of rail with 2 fish plates on it to act as a drilling guide. So all I have to do is to slip that onto the rail end, like that. And then the first hole is a small hole, a little pilot hole. That goes through there. The other one started. The other one through. And then open the hole up to a slightly bigger one, so the fish plate bolt has got room to slide. It needs a slightly bigger hole so that the rails can expand in the heat. Next one. So this morning we're bending some rails to make the curve for the turning loop. We've got this little tool. It's a rail bender. There's 2 fixed rollers and 1 roller that you can adjust to how much you want to bend the rail around the rollers, and so all we have to do is to wind the handle very hard and force the straight rail through, and it should come out with a nice curve on it. Right, let's see if we can do it.
So what was a straight rail is now beautifully curved. Whether it's the right curve or not is another matter altogether. So we've got a couple of little fish plates here to join the rails together. Very simply, put that down there, that on there, put one of the little bolts through. Get a knot on the other side. So in a moment I'll tighten them up with a spanner, but the idea is they actually allow a little bit of movement for the track to expand. A little gap in there. So we've got the curved track coming round here, and because the inner rails don't go quite so far, you have to trim the end off the rail each time, otherwise the joints will get staggered. So I've made a little mark square across the end, and we have an angle grinder, and I will now cut the end off. One small piece of rail chopped off the end, and they're now nice and square, ready for the next length. So the job today is to put all the sleepers under the rails. The sleepers are pre-drilled with holes for the screws so it holds the track to the correct gauge, and I've made little white dots all the way along the track so I know where to put the sleepers. So it's quite simple. It's a question of lifting the rails, getting a sleeper underneath, and putting it in the back position, and then some screws. So that's a few done, and now it's just a question of doing the rest of the line. So we've got 20 tons of ballast chips delivered here. It's granite chips. It's important they're crushed. Shingle's no use because it's round and it just moves around. This stuff locks together. It's really nice and crunchy, and all the little sharp edges it locks together. There was actually a train crash in Kent caused by the fact they used shingle from the beaches in Kent as ballast. Anyway, we've got some homemade buckets here to take it down the line, and doesn't take long to load them up. Now to load them onto the train. Okay, off we go down the line. So the situation at the moment is we've got the track laid on a very thin bed of ballast just to give me something to set the track onto. And now we're building up the ballast to actually hold the track in place. So I've just done that bit there. You can see that the ballast is much deeper around the sleepers, whereas here it's just sitting on the top. So I've got these homemade buckets, and we'll just put the ballast on. Another bucket full. Right, then I just use a yard brush just to get it levelled up and sort of sugar it into all the little gaps. It's a bit high there, but it goes along. This is the easy bit of the job. Carrying it down is the hard work, or at least loading up the buckets is the hard work. Well, that's really finished the turning loop, more or less. I've just finished ballasting the last little bit of track up to the point where it runs back into the main line again. And now I just want to have a look. I've done quite a lot of it already, but the idea with the ballast is you can move the track so easily, sideways or up or down. If you look right along here, there's a join I can see is not perfect here. So if you get right down low now, you'll see that this is not perfectly lined up. So that join wants to move just a fraction that way, and it doesn't take much effort to do it. So if I just do that and then brush it back in so the stones go on either side, so that now has got that joint lined up. So this is the last length of track running up to the point, and looking along at a sort of worm's eye view, you can see it's a little bit low in the middle. So all I have to do with this lovely ballast stones I just put down, all I have to do is just get my hands under it and do this. There we are. And now, if we look along again, that should now be, I'll look back towards you. If I look along now, well, that's lovely now. That is pretty much perfect. And then what we need is a little bit more ballast, just spread it into here, because I've lifted it up now. So you lose more ballast just along here. Brush that in. Here's the brush. And that really is that bit of line beautifully lined up, and essentially, other than some minor titivation, that is the turning loop finished. I think we just go for a little scoot round on the wagons. They're light, which means they're really susceptible to coming off the track. Heavily loaded wagons will stay on almost any track, but we go for a little scoot round and we just feel what the joints are like on the as we go round. And there may be a little tiny bit of adjustment I need to do before the grand opening ceremony with Bongo at high speed round what I hope is an extremely smooth piece of railway. Network Rail will be jealous. Right, off we go. You didn't really think I'd show you the whole of the new loop with me just scooting round on some wagons. So here's Bongo with a series of clips showing you the whole way round the new part of the line. So here we go over the metal bridge. Now approaching the points which used to take you into the little terminus station. Now we're on the new loop. I hope you've enjoyed this film. If you have, please subscribe to our channel or give us a thumbs up. It all helps to spread the word. So this was filmed by Peter from a drone. And here we are, tearing up through the woods, through the cutting which Harry and I mattocked out by hand. And finally, coming across the new points and back onto the main line facing the other way. Bye bye for now.